What's up, everybody? My name is Seth, and we are back in with some more Trove to Drove. Today, we're going to be talking about the recent developer live stream. This is going to end up being the live stream from last week. Tomorrow's going to end up being a new live stream, and more than likely, they're going to just talk about like the Trove Geode stuff. But last week, we actually ended up having quite a few really cool questions asked and get answered, including talk about the new gear and how that's going to end up having a part to play in the fall update, and also a confirmation again on the new types of gems. Now, let it be clear here, guys. A couple weeks ago, we ended up talking about there being a new tier or a potential new tier, while the developers were very specific about saying that there was a new type. So we are going to be able to answer that question today once and for all as to what exactly is going to end up happening with the new gems, because everybody is just wondering, like, is it just going to add a whole new tier, thus making it so that we have to spend more money, or just grind like hours on end for all the same things that we already have? Well, there's a good and a bad answer to the solution that they've come up with. But in either case, before we get started, shout out to Shirokiri, because they ended up making the post that I'm going to be reading right now. I'll put a link in the description to that post so that you can read it for yourselves if you want. And I would appreciate if you would hit that like button before we get started. Makes the video show up in searches and stuff so that people can end up figuring all this out. So, are there any new fish in Geode? Nope. Thank goodness there's no fishing in the caves, because that would be disgusting. And then another question asking about how a lot of the costumes only end up giving 70 or 35 mastery instead of giving 70. So the Trove Geode update ends up correcting that. That's already on the test server right now, where we do in fact see the numbers end up getting changed, and we end up getting a huge boost in mastery. So it's cool that they're going to end up fixing that. And then the next question is, assuming we get new gear rarity at some point, will you please make it so it doesn't drop from Magic Find, as that would protect the value of both the new gear and of Stellar Souls? I like that, because Stellar Souls are absolute trash. Stellar Souls, by the way, guys, are going to end up increasing in value, I'm pretty sure, because their soul sync that they're supposed to be doing with them is that in the update coming in June 26th, the Geode update, we can actually craft light chaos vaults. Unfortunately, they cost divinity souls, which means it's time gated, so it's not really going to end up being that much of a soul sync. But we'll just kind of have to wait and see. But anyways, the developers actually respond with saying, yes, that was an easy answer because it's already considered in the stuff we're building. So it means that whatever the new tier of gear that's coming into the game is going to end up being, we're most likely going to have to forge it. I'm assuming something very similar to what we've seen with the modules in the Geode update, where we're going to have to go to a specific area to grind all these resources and then use those resources to end up grinding up the gear. Or maybe it'll just be the more traditional, go over to a forge and rank it up, right? They ended up taking the Shaper Stars out of the game with the Trove Geode update, so maybe they're just going to recycle them over to the next tier of gear, but I don't know. We'll just have to take a peek, or wait and see, not take a peek. We'll have to wait and see what happens with that. Next question is, what is the Sword of Virtue? So, we've seen this periodically. It only ever really makes us confused, and the developers say your guess is as good as ours, probably just a random string of text error or something. And then the next question is, will the next big update introduce new gem abilities? So this is the interesting part here, guys. So the response is not immediately. There's not going to end up being any gems introduced with the Trove Geode update, but the Trove Geode update apparently is supposed to be setting down the foundation for U10. So based on where Trove Geode is right now, where it's a little bit of a grind fest, a lot of the numbers are being recalculated and stuff like that. They really do need to rebalance it because it's way too difficult, or way too time consuming, I should say. And my point being is that the Trove Geode update you can kind of use as an example of what they're going to end up doing with U10. They've talked about progression in Trove and how they've wanted to change the combat progression and stuff like that. So that's why I'm assuming that a lot of what's going on with Trove Geode is going to end up coming into play with U10. They have hinted at that, and how the Trove Geode update in its entirety is supposed to kind of be the tip of the iceberg, setting up the foundation for the U10 update. But anyways, they say not immediately. Gems will receive a much needed update when we visit Geode's surface to fight back the shadow after Geode's initial release. So the update after the Geode update is supposed to be U10. So that means that U10 is in fact just going to end up being the surface of the Geode area. So, I mean, hopefully they refine it a little bit. Honestly speaking, we were all expecting something a little more akin to the tutorial world, where it was going to end up being something very specifically designed and very cool because of that. But if it's just going to end up being another weird random biome and it just kind of looks all red and gross, I mean, I don't know. We'll just have to see. I'm not too excited about it. But the fact that they say that the gems will receive a much needed update kind of has me a little bit worried, because I mean, I'm sure what they're thinking is going to end up being good. It's going to end up being, you know, a good change, kind of rip off the band-aid and make the gems a little bit better. Hopefully a little less broken in the fact that they're extremely pay to win. But it makes me worried that they're going to end up doing the same thing that they're doing with the modules again in the Geode update. So I don't know. Any info on the next class, as in its weapon that it's being used? So they say they're not allowed to say yet. They have talked about how they're going to hopefully continuously introduce one new class every year. So we'll probably end up seeing a new class come out at the beginning of the year. You know, that's usually the dead times as far as video games, or even just like YouTube and everything like that. Everything's just dead because everybody's busy with school. So when they introduce a new class, it's kind of something where it's a longevity of content dragged out for the sake of just leveling up the character, right? Unless you use XP potions and all that stuff. But either way, I'm still fingers crossed that it's going to be a two-handed sword character, because that might even top the Vanguard for me. Then there's also the next question is, will some classes that have buffs or difficulty to track abilities, like the Tomb Raiser's minion count or Banshee's boon duration, blah, 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 will it be shown in the hotbar in the future? If clutter is a potential issue, would a settings option to disable them work? So somebody's asking if you can have something on the hotbar showing the amount of minions that you have as the Tomb Raiser, which honestly speaking, this game is not that complex. You don't need to know how many Tomb Raiser minions you have. That's getting a little too meta. But the developers actually go on to say that not completely out of the question, but we don't want to have a traditionally cluttered MMO buff bar, which, I mean, unfortunately, they don't seem to mind cluttering up the entire screen with all of the error stuff. Like back in the day, the only thing that was actually showing up on the screen was the hotbar down at the bottom, and that was it. And then they ended up slowly just introducing like the compass and all these other weird things. And I mean, that's just coming from an old school player like myself, right? But anyways, the next question is, will the new Battle Royale mode count for getting the Glorious Gladiator trophy? The developers say that the Glorious Gladiator trophy was awarded for hitting mastery, or for hitting rank 50 in the battle arena. Bomber Royale is a separate system, but they're going to see if they can affect it in a favorable way, because unfortunately, when the Trove Geode update ends up coming out, guys, it seems like you're just fresh out of luck in terms of grinding anything in the PvP tab right here, which honestly doesn't really matter, because you don't really get any mastery from it, and it was kind of gross as far as the grind is concerned. But at least with Bomber Royale, you know, it's kind of a little bit more fun and exciting. It still is disappointing that they don't give us the option to do it on our own custom maps, though, dude. Like, that would have been so cool. So next question is, would it be possible to add a vibration feature for controllers when fishing and it's time to reel in? The sound doesn't always play, and sometimes you can't see the lure moving. I completely agree with this. I think that they should have added something like this for a very, very long time. You know, whenever I was grinding my fishing, I would use the controller, because then I could actually like sit on the couch and watch something on my TV, right? And in a lot of ways, I had to actually augment the noise in Trove to end up being super duper loud, so that I'd be watching a video at like a really, really low volume, and then every time I would hear the sound effects in Trove go off, then I would know to press the button. But it would have been a lot better if I could just set it up where you know, Just that, I would feel the vibration. So the developers say that it's a neat suggestion and they'll investigate it. I don't know why they didn't think to do that. I thought that right away, but it's good that somebody ended up asking, right? So can the fishing button and the loot vacuum be different buttons? It's annoying trying to pick up loot and the character fishing instead. All they say is sorry about that. Console players are just screwed, I guess. Any new items to be added in the Trove of Wonder this year? They say that, nope, we want to add a new version of Trove of Wonders, but it keeps getting pushed in favor of other content. Oh, you mean other greater caches and stuff like that? They should end up adding a new type of Trove of Wonder, but it shouldn't be just a new type of Trove of Wonder. Like, Trove loves its loot boxes a little too much, don't you think? Like there's too many things that get added to the game that just end up foreshadowing any of the current content, thus making it irrelevant. Like, Gonda is pretty much the only mount in the game that stayed like rare and unique. We've never even seen Yabaki, despite the fact that they gave out 3 codes to everybody like at the beginning of the year, and I don't really expect to ever see Yabaki added to the game. They try to build hype around it, and then they just don't follow through with the Yabaki. That's going to end up being kind of an inverted Gonda. It's Shadow Gonda. It's in the game's code. It works, but they just don't release it. So maybe that's what the the alternative to the Trove of Wonders is going to be. Maybe it's going to be kind of a dark version or something. I would rather see maybe a merchant in U10 end up selling the new Shadow Trove of Wonders, and that's where you could get Yabaki as well as a bunch of our Shadow mounts that might have a cool function. I don't think that it should be sold for Flux. I think that it should end up being sold for a different type of resource or something to that effect. And then anyways, the next question is, will the old daily/monthly login tokens return to the store so people who missed out can purchase the mounts? This is cool. I like this answer. This is kind of a little bit forward thinking, but the developers say probably not. The Radiant Dayspring in itself isn't really being used by many players, so they're going to be removing it from the game. So you're not going to be able to see this thing around anymore, and you're not going to be able to see these tokens around anymore. They say any missed items will end up appearing in Luxian's inventory in the future, which we kind of already knew that. He's already started doing that. He hasn't ended up selling the Dormant Lorekeeper Dragon Egg yet, but one thing that I find disappointing about that is these boons right here. Like, I feel that the daily login thing is actually a good thing. It's just the sheer daunting amount of having to get like this many tokens just so that you can get all these items. I think that's not enough incentive for people, because then they just see those numbers and they go, I got work or I got school. I can't log in. So screw it. I'm not going to bother logging in 18 times within a month just to end up getting this one item. And then on top of that, free-to-play players do not have the opportunity to get these boon boxes, which are single-handedly the greatest way in the game to actually get Bound Brilliance, because lots of people are always complaining about Bound Brilliance. Now, if this was going to end up being a continual system, honestly speaking, I would recommend that you end up spending all your tokens on boons rather than even bothering with most of the things that end up coming out of it. I think also it's just the fact that none of the items are very interesting, and just the fact that they don't end up having a better system with all the tokens and stuff. But it doesn't matter because they're getting rid of it. So less clutter in my eyes, right? And then another question, will current gems we've worked hard to get, this is the big one, guys. This is the one that you've all been waiting for, talking about the new gems that they're going to be introducing in the fall update. So will current gems we've worked hard to upgrade maintain viable or remain viable in the future of new gems being introduced? If a new rarity beyond stellar gems is released, how will it affect our current gem progress? So the developers do go on to say that it's a bit too early for us to discuss this right now, but the initial idea is to add new colors of gems and new slots to support them. Colors with a plural S. So I wanted to talk about this for a while, but I didn't really mention it. There was a live streamer, I don't know if he still streams Trove or still streams in general, called Dismantled Time. And he's one of the old boys like me. We've been playing this game for a very long time. I don't know whether he's still playing it, but the point is that way back, he was actually a really good source of information for a lot of the stuff that was going on kind of in the game's code and junk like that, because he ended up having quite a few people actually following him. Him and I talked every now and then, and he was a cool dude. back in the day, he actually told me about the fact that earth gems were actually in the game's code. So he was sitting there speculating that earth gems were eventually going to end up becoming a thing. And then we ended up finding out later on, we finally got it out of the developers, where they ended up telling us that earth gems were just something that was for internal testing, and then they never ended up making their way into the game. And now we're seeing a new color of gems being added into the game. So I'm just trying to get the point across that unfortunately it's starting to seem like Trove is getting into a redundant pattern of recycling old content and recycling old ideas, presenting them as something new so that they can end up making a quick buck. Maybe that's a little overly critical of me to think that way, but we'll just have to kind of wait and see what ends up happening with that. But if they do just end up introducing a new color of gems that are going to operate the exact same way as the current gems do, with not really any changes, then we're just getting stronger for the sake of getting stronger, and they want us to spend money for the sake of getting stronger for what? You know? One of my biggest criticisms of the Trove Geode update isn't the fact that they are adding a whole new separate tier of mastery. It's the fact that they're doing that, and in itself it makes me kind of think the same thing, where it's like, are they really out of ideas where they aren't bothering working on normal mastery anymore? Now they're kind of just working on a separate tier because normal mastery is just so obscurely unobtainable, right? And this is where I would like to put my 2 cents in to say that once again, I think that the developers seriously need to start considering the future of Trove, because as it stands right now, it's not going to last. And I'm not talking about the popularity of the game or anything like that. I don't think that the game's going to end up losing any popularity, just as I don't think it's going to end up gaining that much popularity. As it stands right now, it's just kind of sitting there, and that's it. I'm more so talking about the future of Trove in its development and the progress towards the player, because as they just slowly end up adding more and more clutter to the game in terms of mounts, costumes, and content, there's just way too much, and it's slowly becoming a big problem where a lot of the game is becoming very unapproachable for new players, outside of the fact that they have to spend like hundreds of dollars just to get started, right? Which I guess the real point is that they don't really got to think about that because they're making money off of it, right? But hey, anyways, I don't know whether or not that's the developer's decision or some CEO in charge of marketing. But anyways, they go on to say that the different color gems will offer new stats that we've not seen before and would complement the core Trove gems. So maybe it's not just going to be as simple as a whole other color. Maybe, it sounds like it's going to end up being kind of an augment gem, so maybe it's going to end up changing the gameplay a bit, or giving us access to more control over our character. But again, it has me suspect to think that it's going to end up working very similarly to the modules, where it's just going to end up costing a certain amount of resources to upgrade them outright. That is going to incidentally be a resource that you'll most likely end up getting out of like some other type of greater cache or something, right? And then they say that ultimately it'll depend on how U10 shakes out. So we'll probably be ready to talk about that more in the future. So hopefully within the next few months, because this update, the Trove Geode update, is already going to be coming out June 26th. And then the next update apparently is going to end up being U10, unless they end up adding a different update around the fall, and then they end up delaying U10 to the end of the year to get all that Christmas money, right? But I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. So then the next question is here. Is there any additional information on how you plan to change leveling up for smaller clubs? Will there be more than an XP change? So they just mentioned that they're going to end up kind of changing and reducing the amount of XP required for clubs to level up. Can jumping jadefish ever be placed in the market? I can answer that one and just say a flat out no, because the way that Trove ends up working is every item that you actually have in your inventory is completely separate from what you put in the market. This is, we've been able to see this actually come into action, where you'll add like, a Halloween mount a while ago was added to the market, and it ended up having the wrong character model, whereas some other items just got added to the market that didn't end up actually working out, and was it was actually a completely different mount name, right? So you gotta consider the fact that this item right here, the chaotic sail, The purchase that you're making is a different item. You're buying the market item, and then this is just going to transfer itself into the actual item that gets thrown into your inventory. And because of this, that's why gear and fish and anything that has random stat values can't be added to the market, because there would be way too many variables. The market in itself would probably just end up crashing because of it, because suddenly the game would have to take into account that you're adding a specific type of gear with specific stats, where the way that Trove actually works is if you added like a stellar sword to the market, the game would have no way of determining the stats that are actually equated to that specific gear. So you would take it off of the market, and then it would either randomize the stats or just give you a default set of gear. That's why when you end up purchasing gear from the fixture merchant, he just ends up giving you gear with random stat values to them and stuff like that, right? So then last but not least, if Bomber Royale rewards have mastery, will those be tradable? So the developers go on to say that yes, Bomber Royale coins are the reward for placing in the top 10 for a match and are not tradable. However, nearly all of the items bought with the Battle Royale coins are tradable. One of the items that isn't tradable is called the Explosive Rewards Chest. It is going to end up being a seasonal chest and has a random assortment of progression-related items like Flux, Lesser Caches, Experience, and Adventure Potions. Not really anything mandatory. You might also be happy to know that there's a legendary tome that costs 20 Battle Royale coins to purchase and yields 5 coins per week. To be transparent, the point of the tome is to have people who might not normally like PvP try out Bomber Royale just to end up getting the tome and then just grind it out through PvE action. Except for the fact that it only gives you 5, and it's one of the most useless legendary tomes right next to the fish tome. But anyways, folks, that's already going to do it for today. So this video was a little bit longer than I expected it would be, but we had some really big questions that we needed to answer and talk about today. So it's really, really cool that we kind of get a little bit more insight towards the new gem system. I am still excited about it, and it does sound like they're not just going to be adding like a new tier or even just a new color that's going to be thrown into this inventory. On one hand, it doesn't sound like that because they say that it's going to end up augmenting the current gems and stuff like that. But they do specifically say that they're going to be adding new colors, implying that there's going to be more than one, and that they're going to end up having more gem slots associated to that. So does that mean we're going to get new empower gems, or are we just going to see one gem slot here, one slot here, and maybe there's only going to end up being 2 new colors of gems, and maybe each of these gems is just going to end up affecting your character in a very big way, rather than having to grind like a whole bunch of different gems and stuff like that, right? I don't know. Let me know your speculations in the comment section down below. I would love to hear your feedback and thoughts to what you think they're going to end up doing with the gem system. That's pretty much the biggest thing that everyone's excited about, right? Like even with the Trove Geode update, not many people are excited about how slow and boring the gameplay is. I actually kind of like it, despite the fact that I feel it's very unbalanced right now. But I would recommend that you do kind of get into the Trove Geode update at least a little bit, because I'm thinking that they're going to end up making a lot of those items kind of mandatory towards the progression of U10, but who knows? We just gotta wait and see. Thanks for watching though, folks. Very much appreciate it. Don't forget to like, share, favorite, and subscribe for more daily content. And if you want to support me, you can always sponsor my YouTube channel or check links in the description for my merch store. We got some new summer themed shirts. There's also a link to Gawkbox, which is a way that you can actually donate to me for free through sponsored donations. Doesn't work for everyone in Europe, unfortunately. Sayonara and stay epic, everybody.